It appears that we are live, and oh my gosh, it's finally Friday.
Very much so.
So, everyone, I am joined by a special guest today to help educate me and possibly you on the Space Force, the United States Space Force. We are joined by Chuck, and tell us a
Yes.
little bit more about your title and your role there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I usually start with saying the disclaimer that, the views and opinions that I share on this are of my own and don't represent the DoD or the Department of the Air Force, just to put the disclaimer there. It's part of our social media policy. So if there are questions and answers, I'll provide kind of my context, my background, my experience, and hopefully that will help answer the questions for you and your audience.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm active duty. Been in the Space Force ever since it started. I transferred actually in 2020, so just a few months after inception in 2019. Currently, I'm stationed out at Buckley Space Force Base in Colorado, and my role is missile warning, missile tracking, and we manage all of the overhead constellation that does missile warning and missile tracking. And then we also have GBRs all across the United States that have been around since the 50s, actually, that kind of do most of our space surveillance and missile warning portions of the enterprise.
Wow. Let me add a banner just so people know. Chat with a space. You're called a Guardian, right?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Is everyone given the title Guardian?
Anyone that's in the Space Force, yeah. The civilians are also called Guardians that work with us, and any active duty member as well.
Awesome. So I remember when this was announced and this Space Force was created, and I feel like there were maybe some jokes made about it at the time, and some people still, I think to this day, don't really understand, what is the point of this? And obviously, for those of us in the space community, we know that low Earth orbit is only going to get more crowded. The idea of, settling off Earth and, territories being fought over potentially. So tell me why having a Space Force is actually really important.
Yeah, I'd love to share. So when the Space Force first started, just to kind of give you some history, a lot of the space defense roles were actually distributed across the DoD in various services. So you had services, for instance, like the United States Army that actually managed the satellite communication constellations to some degree. In the United States Air Force, they were the ones that were responsible for managing constellations such as GPS, our navigation capabilities. The Navy had some space services as well. So when the Space Force first started, it was kind of a blend of the understanding that as an enterprise, it's important to take those equities out, put them underneath their own service, and now deliberately dedicate what defense looks like from a space enterprise solution to get after the problem set. And the problem set obviously is the adversary continuously updating and developing their space capabilities. And realistically, it comes down to protecting space into and from space. So that goes from terrestrial-based space launches, as we frequently see with SpaceX and with Blue Origin as well. And then human space flight is a significant aspect of that. And then, of course, on orbit. The countries that have space access are only developing their technology more and more. And we're beginning to see some things that could potentially threaten those constellations on orbit. And we want to keep that critical infrastructure intact. And by doing so, we apply now defense requirements to those.
Right. No, it makes sense to me, and it makes sense to Scott saying consolidation as one service makes sense.
Yeah.
And you're helping to educate me and hopefully other people. If you have questions, please be sure to ask them. But what other countries sort of have like a dedicated Space Force like the United States has now?
Yeah, from my understanding, we're probably the most robust military branch with a Space Force. Other countries, they are incorporating space defense in their posturing. For instance, we have adversaries, or allies that work with us from the UK and from Canada, and they actually work right here with us in the United States, and they have their own space components within their branches of military as well. They don't have a dedicated service like we do as part of the DoD, but they absolutely do have space equities within their military.
Yeah, I was quite surprised that you're even allowed to like do a live stream and talk about, at least to some extent what you do and what the Space Force is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, the so our social media policy is really fluid. It's very strict. Basically, we just maintain a professional manner on social media. I've often worked with other social media managers and public affairs liaisons to kind of help spread the message on what the Space Force is. I was even leveraging my own personal platform on TikTok for a while, as I was the chief of innovation, and I was looking for a unique way to get after social innovation and to be able to kind of teach and inform the public about what it is the Space Force really does. And my whole goal with that was to potentially reach people that were interested in space as a whole, maybe even youth, that are going through school, and hopefully maybe even empower or motivate them to take an interest in space. And by doing so, by joining the military.
Yeah, it looked like you had a pretty big following on TikTok.
Yeah, I've got quite a bit on there. It's pretty awesome. The interaction's always been really positive, and I love using it. It's great.
Yeah, tell us, what you would tell maybe someone in high school about what you do and why they might want to consider joining.
Yeah, for sure. I've actually done school visits. We have a STEM to space program that we have within the Space Force, where they usually ask guardians to go out and do public interactions with school visits and essentially take questions from various age groups. And most of the time, the common, I guess, understanding is that when you think of space, you think of astronauts and going to space. You don't really relate, the military being a part of that. So when I, speak to kids that are interested in the Space Force and they ask questions like, "Hey, what do you really do?" I usually tell them like, "Well, all those critical capabilities that you utilize, day to day, like your cell phone technology and your navigation capabilities, we're the service that defends all that from potential adversaries, damaging or destroying any of those capabilities. So we learn the skills and the training in order for us to continue providing that as a defense for those capabilities." So that kind of gets the message sold a little bit. Then they usually ask more questions like, "Well, like what, what do you specifically do?" And then I tell them all the various different types of missions that we have with SATCOM and launch is also within our realm as well. So we have a lot of really cool career fields within the Space Force.
Yeah, we have some questions coming in, so I'll read some of them. Zap fan wants to know, do you do anything with planetary defense, like looking for asteroids?
Yeah, actually, that was a recent question I had on X the other day. There was a recent article that was posted from NASA sharing what the planetary defense relationship looked like between NASA and the Space Force. So NASA does, most of the research and development and the science of the things. But there is a planetary defense relationship between the Space Force when it comes to, threats towards Earth, really, and when the Space Force actually comes into role and play. So there's a good relationship there. Of course, we're always studying space and there's always new things to discover. So quite a cool relationship there.
Well, I wanted to share, we do have some more questions coming in, but while we've been trying to do this live stream for a little bit now.
Yes. Yeah.
And I saw this very unlikely thing come across my feed. So United States Space Force posted July 12th. Thank you, Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, yeah.
And Fly Me movie for your support of the Space Force. Let's play it.
Happy 5th birthday, Space Force Guardians. I'm Scarlett Johansson from Fly Me to the Moon, and I want to congratulate you on this incredible milestone. Your dedication to secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space is truly inspiring. Here's to 5 amazing years and many more to come. Happy 5th birthday, United States Space Force, and Semper Supra.
Semper Supra. And wow, 5 years, and I was showing that to my boyfriend, and he's like, "Why is Scarlett Johansson there?" So that was, interesting, thing to see.
Yeah.
Tell me how much it's evolved in the past 5 years, being a new branch and all.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The Space Force continuously changes. We're currently going through. You might have seen some of the articles about what Space Force fourth generation looks like, and the evolution from day one of when the Space Force first started to where it is now is vastly different. Just from command structure, development of relationships with other services, even joint partnerships with other allied nations. That growth has continued to occur over the past few years, and it continues to strengthen, which is really excellent and amazing. Even when it comes down to the development of our guardians who are wearing the uniform every day, they come in truly excited to be a part of the very first generation of a brand new service. We haven't seen that since 1947, right, when the Air Force first established, and to be a part of the Space Force now in its infancy, and then watching it grow over time. You're laying some bedrock here, actual foundations on how the Space Force will continue to grow. So it's been quite amazing to watch, just evolution wise. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like I can't even think what another branch would be. Like the Space Force seems like the last one, the final frontier.
Mm-hmm.
Ross wants to know, what are the similarities and differences in serving as a U.S. Space Force Guardian compared to serving with one of the other branches of the U.S. military?
That's a really great question. So I wasn't always a Space Force guy. I've been in 19 years. So I served in the Air Force my first 15 years of being in the military. And even during that time, I worked in joint environments. So I was assigned to the Army through a jet tasking back in 2008 when I was deployed to Afghanistan. So seeing Army culture from that standpoint, I've been in different bases as well, where I worked with the Marine Corps and the Navy. So seeing the different services and their cultures really truly gave me a different insight as to the differences that each service really has and how much we play a role in the defense of the nation. We all have our unique specialties and roles and responsibilities. And then that comes with the culture and the mindset of, what types of people we recruit to do what we do every day. And we're starting to see our culture grow because of that. We've actually brought in inter-service transfers from the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy into the Space Force, which has started to shape some of our culture as well, which is pretty unique in its own.
Yeah, it might be, I don't know if you can even answer, but which one do you feel is harder for you? Because you spent such a long time in the Air Force.
To be honest, it's kind of natural now. Being in the Space Force, you kind of focus differently on the problem set at hand. We're very much so interested in being able to present capabilities to the warfighter, such as, we could say satellite communications is critically important. All the warfighters that are flying in theater all around the world at any given moment require on that communication capability. So, leaning on our guardians that are managing those architectures, that's the mindset that we're put into now versus the airman who's about to step to the aircraft and fly the plane. Much different mindset and culture and what we do day to day, but still very much so important.
Well, we have Ego Doge saying, so envious. I'm retired Air Force. I wish I had a chance to serve in the Space Force. What an important and unique mission. Tell me, how hard is it to, I'm sure you're probably recruiting?
Yeah, we actually have recruitment. The strategy right now is baked within the Air Force recruiting centers. We don't have our own individual like Space Force recruiting centers yet. I imagine that will happen eventually. So if you go through United States Air Force recruiting centers, since we do belong to the Department of the Air Force, you can go speak to them and express your interest of becoming a Space Force Guardian. And yeah, it's capped right now to about, I think they just increased it to 850 per year, but which continuously growing, which is good.
How large is it right now? How many people are in the Space Force?
We're changing quite a bit. The last numbers that I was tracking was about 16,000 members in the Space Force. That includes uniform and civilian. Uniform members, I believe, are still around 10,000 or less. So not very many of us at the moment. We're actually smaller, we're the smallest branch of service in comparison to the others.
Which makes sense because you're the newest.
Yeah.
Would someone be able to just enter the Space Force without having any prior experience in any other branch, or not quite yet?
Yeah. Through our enlistment, you can show up to the recruiting center. If you have education in space, we always accept that. Or if you have education in cybersecurity, that's also another critical. You don't have to come with, a significant amount of experience to be eligible to be a Guardian. Ultimately, you just pass the same testing requirements that any other enlisted member would have to go through, like the ASVAB and those testing criteria, and then you're off on your way to the basic training.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. So, because I've had some people say that I should apply to be an astronaut, and I do not have the qualifications to do that. Could I apply to be in the Space Force?
Absolutely, yeah. And if you wanted to, there's two different pathways. You can go the enlisted route, through a recruiting center, or you can go through a recruiting center and commissioned as an officer. If you have an education with a bachelor's degree, you can go through officer training school and become a commissioned officer, like myself. Those are two different pathways you can go do.
Wow. And is this true? John says the class of 2028 just arrived July 2nd to start training?
Probably through the Air Force Academy. Yeah. If they're going through the Air Force Academy, you can also be a Guardian from that aspect too. So you can come to Colorado Springs and go to the Air Force Academy. Of course, the benefit of that is they pay for your schooling. So you don't have to come out at the end of the schooling with debt already, which is a huge bonus, but it is a military school. So your first few years are going to be very strict. And then, of course, when you graduate in whatever class you're assigned to, you can become a Guardian or an airman.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
These questions might be a little bit out of order, but we are getting more questions. So Tin Man wants to know, does Space Force have a contingency plan to mitigate Kessler syndrome if it occurs?
That's a question that's kind of outside of my league, I think. I don't really know if we do or not.
Well, the space lawyer that I interviewed last week said we're basically already in it, which I was surprised to hear. Mm-hmm. But, basically we're, if we're not careful, we will be at the point of no return pretty soon. So, above my pay grade, that one. Yeah. Alan wants to know, what percentage does the Space Force depend on government resources compared to private?
That's a great question too. Government resources, right? We're federally funded. So the majority of our government resources come from the federal government aspect of things, just like any other DoD branch. So, we put out what our budget requirements are every year in order to sustain operations. And then those budget requirements make it all the way up to Congress for approval, or not, right? So we're in competition with the rest of the DoD as far as how we attribute specific funding and resources of things. But of course, the proper pay grades way above me are the ones making those decisions at Congress as well. So I just help inform from an operator standpoint of like, hey, these are the things that I need. I don't exactly know how much it costs, but if you can help me get the resources, then that'd be really fantastic.
Yeah. Are there any favorite TikToks that we should pull up?
Of mine? Oh man. I have a lot of oldies and a lot of goodies out there. I don't know anymore. It's been a while since I've posted,
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe you should start posting again. TikTok
Yeah,
is tough to break into. Let me tell you.
it's true. Yeah, I did. My wife. So the whole reason why I started with TikTok is I got an account because my daughter was on it, and I was like, I need to know what she's seeing every day. And then I posted like one video of just me being in the Space Force, and it went crazy. And I told my daughter, I was like, "Hey, is this normal? I don't know what's happening." And she goes, "Yeah, you're totally trending, Dad. Like you're trending right now. This is so crazy." She's like, "How did you do that?"
What?
So my wife encouraged me to do it, and then I started building the platform of Space Force Chuck to be kind of like. She was like, "You could be like the Bill Nye of Space Force," you know. And I'm not quite that intelligent, but I could be an advocate for Space Force, which is, it's been a blessing, to be honest. I've been able to interact with kids, through the platform, and it's been really cool. I've been sharing Space Force swag. I'd send them a letter with my own personal note on there, encouraging people. So it's been kind of a blessing in disguise. Unfortunately, TikTok's got some, you know, security issues or concerns from the DoD's perspective. But we mitigate that through other social media platforms as well.
So essentially, because obviously there's TikTok might be banned. I don't really know what's happening with that. Is
yeah.
it going to ban it or not?
So so TikTok came out. Well, the DoD banned it from any military devices, right? So you can't play TikTok on your government issued cell phone, which absolutely makes sense. On personal devices, not so much. Members can use TikTok. That's a freedom of speech thing that they won't impose on. Whether it gets banned from the United States, from what I had last read in the open source, was that they were looking for a strategy. Be in charge of it, but I don't know anything else besides that.
Okay. So essentially, are you not allowed to make TikToks anymore about your job?
I mean, I can make TikToks. I just got to be careful with which ones I talk about.
Got it. Well,
So
it
I
would
kind of
be.
use.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I use this and Instagram too, to kind of help share the message. So I use whatever platform I have available to me.
Well, it would be fun if I can maybe pull up the one that went viral in a little bit here, but we are getting more questions.
Yeah, sure.
And I am falling behind. So Ross wants to know, how do U.S. Space Force Guardians work alongside civilian Guardians, and how do your respective roles differ?
Great question too. So our civilian Guardians are, they perform roles that would be more the management type environment, right? Most of our civilian Guardians are in leadership roles. Oftentimes we also have civilian contractors that are, well, we consider them Guardians as well because they're contract operations. So those members can be on our ops floors, performing operations right alongside our uniform wearers. Same thing with our allied nations too. They work alongside our Guardians every day. So the roles just vary depending on what organization you work in. I'm more familiar with the operations side, and typically I've seen, our civilian Guardians mainly in leadership roles, or they're working alongside our Guardians in ops.
Cool.
Yeah.
So Edward wants to know, ask what the coolest thing you have witnessed.
Oh, wow. Being in the Space Force so far.
Yeah.
Man, that's I think so. Personally, actually, I'll share a personal story. I know the Space Force is still really new, and we're constantly changing our image, right? And our image is very important to have, like our blue name tapes and blue ranks and our rank structure, and kind of how we fit in the paradigm of DoD. I think my favorite thing, to be perfectly honest, is when we created our first iteration of our enlisted rank insignia on our uniforms. That was a pretty historical moment for the Space Force, because that's the first time we're establishing our identity, especially with the enlisted force structure, different from the Air Force or the Marine Corps. But the second piece to that is I got to meet the individual, and I know him. He's a very close friend of mine, who actually designed the rank as well as our service dress uniform. So it's really awesome to say he's a friend of mine and a colleague, and we work closely together. and to know that he's been a part of like establishing our image and history as a service is basically my favorite thing to know.
That is really cool. And I'm
Yeah.
just pulling up the website just so we have a little bit of visuals here, although I'm not sure if these are the right visuals. But
This is good. This is a good homepage. Yeah.
yeah, wow. Very cool. Okay, hold on. There's so many comments. I'm getting lost in it. Here's a good one that I saw. From Keith, how do you envision the service evolving over the next half century in terms of technology, strategy, and its role in global security?
That is a really big question. How much time do we have? I can probably share what I think my vision is with the next generation of the Space Force. And to be perfectly honest, I think I've kind of iterated this with some of my fellow Guardians on the importance of, generational growth. We're right now in our first 5 years, and just establishing the initial bedrock of the service was a huge undertaking. To the fact of like, how are we going to develop and prepare our Guardians? How are we going to, create an organizational structure that is flat and seamless and easy to communicate? How are we going to make sure that we're integrating amongst each other and coordinating and synchronizing effects? Because there's a lot of things that we're heavily reliant on. In the next generation, I fully see like that development just continuously growing. I don't know if I could forecast for the next 50 years what technology would look like. But simply with the civilian space exploration programs we've seen to date with Starship and Falcon 9, and just the amazing amount of technology leaps that we've taken from that aspect, the possibilities are endless now on what we can then reproduce from a defense aspect as in utilizing that same technology. So I'm hopeful that it will continue to get better and get more exciting over time. At some point I'll get too old to actually do the job anymore, which, I'll be disappointed about, but I'll be having a blast watching junior Guardians coming in and seeing and being able to utilize that technology firsthand. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are only going to increase in importance. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you're already important. It's only going to get... Someday we'll have, if you've watched the show, The Expanse, someday.
I love The Expanse. Yeah.
Beltalowda. Okay.
Yeah.
Is the Space Force working with companies to come up with ways to collect space waste? We know there's a lot of space junk and debris to reduce chances of collisions in orbit.
Yeah, that's a fascinating question too. I don't know if you've ever attended the Space Symposium or had the opportunity. Civilian companies oftentimes approach, with capabilities that they have to get space junk out of orbit. The big challenges there are space debris. If you think about like the shells and casings of, Starship or even Falcon 9, when they're leaving the space junk up there, the size of school buses sometimes, or, even larger. So being able to develop something that is, in mass or large enough to grab something from that and deorbit it safely is a very challenging and very complex scenario to tackle. So is the Space Force working with anyone? I would say that there are civilian companies that are always looking to provide a solution, and the Space Force really hasn't taken that as a mission area. What we do is kind of monitor and manage what space debris is out there, and we inform the public. Everything that we do from a space domain awareness aspect is free access to the public. We use spacetrack.gov, and that data is constantly put out on a database, so anyone in the world can see what objects are in space, and then hopefully utilize that to develop their own technologies to try to tackle that one very critical problem set too. So
for now, the removal is not your circus, not your monkeys.
Yeah, for now, it's not really. I mean, not that I'm aware of, unless, somebody else out there knows, like, hey, we are actually doing that from a DoD perspective.
I guess the question is Starman in the Tesla considered space junk?
Oh, man, not to me.
I know. I can't believe that. That is like
Yeah.
so crazy that
was completely wild. I actually watched that launch live because I was like, they're going to put Starman in a car and put him in space.
it sounds unreal.
Yeah.
Thank you to Ross for the super chat. He writes, U.S. armed forces often work in coalition with international partners, which he's from the UK. What interoperability opportunities and challenges do you foresee for U.S. Space Force Guardians to operate effectively with allies?
Oh, that's great. I mentioned earlier that we have allies that work with us currently. Even like my former boss was a major. He's a Canadian major, and we have an office with allied nation partners that work directly with us. So we continue to strengthen that relationship. In fact, some of our senior leadership that was just selected at our combatant command are from Australia and from the UK. So we've got quite a bit of an extensive relationship with our international partners across the Space Force that are actually serving in the United States alongside us. So, and it's also really exciting to see how the other services, interact with us and their culture and the things that they're concerned with too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ross, for the question and the super chat. And I'm sure you get asked about this a lot, but Barney says you get a lot of UFO questions.
Yes, I do. I think some of my earlier TikToks back in the day always had to deal with aliens and, what do you do if you see an alien? And I think I responded with one video, like, hey, if you see one, let me know. But I don't know if that's, concerning because, the DOD is a part of it or whatever. But yeah, we get a lot of UFO questions. During the administration when Trump was in office, he established the office in the Pentagon to do kind of the UAP detecting or UAP reporting. I didn't really dive too much into it on what they do day to day, but from what I understand, is still around, and I think they get a lot of unique stories and data. So,
okay, well, your personal opinion, are they real or what? Are there aliens?
I mean, we have a huge universe, right? And the possibilities are endless. So, I would not discount the fact that alien life exists somewhere. Whether they frequent Earth or not, I don't know. But we've seen pretty cool stuff on TV. I used to watch a TV series about aliens and UFOs, so it's pretty convincing.
Well, they might already be here. In
Yeah.
some ways, I think Elon might be an alien because how does one man achieve so much? It's crazy. Are there borders in space, or are all points accessible to whoever can get there? From Brian.
Yeah, there's no borders in space. Space is, free access. There's no limitations on who can get into space or who can operate in space. That's kind of the main mechanism of what the DoD is designed to do, is to protect the freedom and utilization of space into and from. So we kind of ensure that sanctuary, if you will, for anyone that's interested in utilizing space.
So I'm going to pull up, if it's okay. The only time I think I've talked about the Space Force on my channel was when the song was making a lot of news headlines. So is it cool if I play it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
You're like, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the official United States Space Force song.
We're the mighty watchful eyes, guardians beyond the blue, the invisible front line, war fighters brave and true, boldly reaching into space. There's no limit to our sky, standing guard both night and day. We're the Space Force strong high.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't want me to sing. I'll probably break the internet. But
do you know it by heart?
I know most of it by heart. I should know it by heart by now. My girls, which is strangely enough, they actually know the song word for word.
Yeah, I just remember at the time it got a lot of not very nice commentary about it.
Yeah, the feedback was kind of negative at first, but I think it's if you listen to the other service songs, it's got that really catchy tunage, to the way the song is built and the lyrics. The really cool aspect about the song was that it was written by a fellow Guardian, and it was presented to the CSO at the time, and they approved the lyrics for the song. So, just more back to like how we're establishing our culture and establishing who we are as Guardians, really leaning in on, the people that are in the service are making huge impacts to that. That is an international song now, and that was written by a Guardian in the Space Force. So I think that I call that a success.
Oh, wow. Your internet just got way better. You look completely clear. That's good.
Well, good to hear. Yeah.
So, and, I'm just going based off of, I'm obviously not within the Space Force or in your realm. So I just remember like when it first was created, there was a lot of kind of jokes about it. Do you remember that? Or was that just my perception?
Okay. We're back.
Yeah.
It glitched.
Like, was there a lot of like pushback and kind of like, silly remarks when it was first created?
Yeah, there was, right? I think the Netflix TV series, that was the Space Force TV series, which kind of fostered some of that humor a little bit. I'll be honest, I watched the TV series. I thought it was great. Even when the service first started, I think there's probably ridicule from all aspects. Like, hey, what's the point of having the Space Force? Then, of course, it's like, oh, what are they actually going to do? Are they really military? I personally don't mind jokes. I've been in 19 years. We get ribbed all the time. Each of the services, rib each other. So it was pretty common for me, but, public perception wasn't that great at first. And that did take some growth from even within the service. But to be honest, I think we just kept marching forward and moving forward with our mission and trying to really develop a service that was applicable and large enough to really take on the complex scenarios and missionaries that we have. But yeah, it's still pretty fun.
Well, now you got Scarlett Johansson on your side. So
yeah.
Who's going to make fun of that?
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. Is the Space Force insignia deliberately similar to the Starfleet insignia from Star Trek?
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I actually posted on X just recently a comparison. It was like a meme I posted about when the Delta was first used. And I believe so historically, the Army and the Navy have used the Delta in symbology for generations, like even in the early 50s. And I think 1961 was the first time that the service actually used a similar symbol. And then in 1966 is when Star Trek came out. So there were quite a few similarities between, Starfleet, but I'll be perfectly honest, like the Guardians are just as much nerds internally. So any affiliation or like association to like sci-fi type based sitcoms that were out there, I mean, it's a huge win for us too, Star Trek and Starfleet and, even the Expanse nowadays. So we all appreciate like the common affiliations because for me, it's being like the little kid who used to watch Star Trek when I was younger and now seeing it come to life, like in real world, like I am actually Space Force Guardian utilizing these things. For me, it's really fun.
So what made you want to make the transition? I mean, obviously you're also into SpaceX, as anyone is who watches the channel.
Yeah. So I was I was prior enlisted, I was an intel guy. And when I became a commissioned officer in 2016, my Air Force career field was space operations. So I was already doing space on the Air Force side. And then when the service first established, they, of course, were looking for organic space operations personnel to fill the service when it first started. And so the opportunity presented itself. It's like, hey, if you're interested in transferring to the service, you can, remain the same career field and just be a Space Force Guardian, or you can transfer out and go into a different role if it's available. But for me, it was an easy transition. I was already at 15 years at that point, and I'm really trying to make it to that 20 mark so I can retire.
Have you wanted to go to space?
Absolutely. Yeah, one of my biggest goals and dreams has always been, getting the opportunity to go to space, even if it's just, a quick visit to touch the exit of the atmosphere and look down at Earth and then come back. That would be phenomenal for me. I've even entertained the idea of going the astronaut program route within the DoD. We have our first Guardian astronaut that is going to be sent up in the next space launch, Colonel Haig. And he's actually going to the International Space Station. So there is an opportunity where Guardians can take that pathway as well. Normally, that comes with training and credentials to be eligible. But if I get the opportunity, I would love to. I don't know how much my wife would like that, though.
When will that be?
I don't know the exact date. I think last I saw was the 9th of September, but I had to look at Spaceflight Now again to see when Colonel Haig's mission takes off.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understood that correctly. A United States Space Force Guardian is going to become the first Space Force astronaut?
Yeah, he will be the first Space Force Guardian astronaut in space on the International Space Station.
Who is he going to fly with?
I don't know the whole crew, actually. Not off the top of my head anyways. I'd have to look to see what crew he's with.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, it's huge and monumental for us. He got sworn in and became an astronaut. Yeah.
Can you spell his name? Sorry.
And it's Hague, Haig, Colonel Haig. And he just recently visited a few sites at NASA and some of the Space Force installations as well. He's currently kind of on like the road show, if you will.
This guy, Tyler Nicholas Haig?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Age 48, okay. United States Space Force Colonel and NASA astronaut class of 2013.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
We even had a really cool historical moment when the service first started. It kind of got overlooked, but we did have an Air Force astronaut on the International Space Station transfer into the Space Force while he was on board. But that happened like really early on in the service, like right as soon as we first established. So it's kind of hidden by other really amazing milestones, but we've come quite a ways when it comes to developing our Guardians for space exploration as well.
Wow. And so has he been to space yet?
That I don't know entirely. I believe he has, because he's part of the 2013 class.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It looks like he has. So I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding it correct.
Yeah.
He has quite an extensive Wikipedia page.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Very cool. So you would want to do it, but your wife wouldn't be so happy with you going to space?
Yeah, she's told me not so much, but
why?
It's been I think she's just more fearful of what may or may not happen, but you
don't want to do an 8-month stay like Butch and Sunny?
Yeah.
Potentially. We're still not sure.
Yeah, we're still waiting, right, on what the outcome of that is.
Yes, we are. And it's been pushed back again, but that's okay. I'm on top of it, guys. I'm going to figure it out for you. Rodney, thank you for the super chat. Here's a couple of dollars towards the cause. I'm not sure what cause, but I guess it's, continuing to make content. So thank you.
Right.
I do appreciate the super chat. I Googled United States Space Force. The most popular searches are mission, function, jobs, purpose, flag, and news. So it seems that a lot of people want to know what you guys do.
Yeah.
The number one question that you get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what is it that the Space Force does? And, I think you can get like the boilerplate response, from senior leadership of, we defend space, into and from space. But then, like, what does that truly mean? And I think the way I usually break it down is kind of what mission areas the Space Force has that we currently operate, like day to day. One intriguing thing is space launch. The ranges where Falcon 9 launched from, Vandenberg Space Force Base and Cape Canaveral, you have DoD like Guardians that work the ranges in defense of those locations. That way those space launches are safely executed. And then from a space operations command aspect, myself, I'm in missile warning. So we look at adversary capabilities from across the world, and we make sure that the homeland is protected if there's any events that may threaten it from that aspect. And then you have other areas like satellite communications. Your Guardians work 24/7 around the clock to ensure, our communication capabilities are always working. GPS navigation, society heavily relies on navigation, not just from, getting to and from your favorite like restaurant or anything, or getting DoorDash delivered to you, but even your ability to purchase groceries at the store, right? The ability for that navigation, and then the timing aspect of it from bank transactions, all enabled by GPS, which is what the Guardians do day to day. So, there's a lot of stuff that we do, which is pretty amazing.
Well, and we have Myra saying thank you for your service.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you can't really tell us much, but is there a lot going on behind the scenes?
There's always stuff going on behind the scenes. Yeah. Yeah. You can get a pretty good idea. The military is always prepped, postured. We're training and exercising all the time. Each service is doing various types of exercises and preparing and training. Right now we have the Navy going out and, posturing themselves in the theater. So there's always something that we're being a part of for the safety and security of the United States, and then of course our allied nations. So quite a bit of things, happen quite often.
What do you think is the biggest myth about the Space Force?
The one that I commonly get is Space Force is cyber. And, I don't like to push back on that entirely. We don't always just do cyber. We have cyber security professionals within our organizations, but they are trained and taught to understand our critical architecture that allows us to communicate, from our ground-based antennas to our on-orbit assets. So, that requires networking, and our cybersecurity professionals understand that networking architecture, and if there's any critical vulnerabilities that are tied to that. So it's not entirely a holistic myth, but we don't just do cyber. We do a lot more.
Yeah, I went to the AIAA conference. This was, I think, 2 years ago. And there was a professor, I think he might be in Colorado, that had, people that were attending play a game with, you were basically a nation, and you could have like the ASATs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And or like better cybersecurity. It was really interesting to, just see how possession of certain things kind of was making a statement as soon as you went there. So it really stressed the importance of cybersecurity in general, and not seeming aggressive, I suppose. But okay, so Al wants to know, will there be a military presence on the moon someday?
I don't know. I get that question quite a bit too. If a military presence is on the moon, right now there's not really a need for it. It's 200,000+, miles, kilometers, whatever you want to say, away from us, and there's no adversary threat to the moon. Civilian research from any country, occurs on the moon, and there's not really a need for a defense mechanism on the moon quite yet. Hopefully never. But it would be cool to have a moon base, I guess, if you're the sci-fi nerd like I am.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a few questions here. This one's kind of a spicy one. Gregory wants to know, if a hostile nation like North Korea launched a missile at Alaska, would the Space Force be involved in the response? And he lives in Alaska, so maybe that's why he's asking. Okay.
Well, the Space Force would be the ones that would get the indications and warning, right, of an event like that taking place. As I mentioned, I'm in the missile warning business. So if a ballistic missile were to take off, from an adversary country like that, we would be the ones that would ultimately see that and report that event, through the appropriate channels. So, there's really great resources available for us to make sure we're informing the right people to go do whatever was necessary to defend the United States.
Good. Semper Supra.
Yeah, awesome.
This is a silly question, but can you upgrade Starliner software?
Unfortunately, no.
Wesley says, how did I not get a notice for this being the live stream? So Wesley, if you have any questions, we've been going for a bit now, and there's allegedly 1,400 or so people watching. So
wow, holy smokes. Yeah.
Let's see here. Ross, does the Outer Space Treaty present any constraints to the aspirations and objectives of the U.S. Space Force?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't do too much outer space problem solving, if you will, within the DoD, so I haven't ran into anything specific. I know that we have some really impressive Space Force attorneys that help kind of manage that world of business for us, when it comes to international relationships and access to space and what we can do and present in space or from space. We take all of those into account, and that's beyond me. That's like way in the Pentagon, Capitol Hill world. But we do have experts that speak to those topics intellectually pretty much on a regular basis, because we see countries becoming more technologically advanced to access space. And of course, we want to make sure that if they're accessing space, it's done safely.
Right. By the way, your cohort, you said Haug? Is that how you pronounce it? Haug?
Haig, yeah.
Haig, yes. So he, in 2019, served as the flight engineer at the ISS for 203 days.
Yep.
And it says that he is actually going to be a part of Crew 9.
Crew 9, okay.
So
Perfect.
that's the one that is being threatened to maybe only have 2 of the 4 go, because they might have to bring home money. So that could be interesting. But yeah, so that's pretty interesting. So as it stands, you only have one Space Force member that's also an astronaut?
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
I haven't had the time to really look into it to see if anybody is in the program currently to become an astronaut. If any one of the new crew trainees are going to be from the Space Force or not, I actually don't know. But I would love to hear, or see another Guardian become an astronaut as well. But he's the first one, which is huge.
Well, it sounds like he was an astronaut first, and then, just with the Space Force being so new, he must have joined after, which makes sense if he's into space.
Right. Yeah. He's got the training.
I don't know if you can answer this, but Michael wants to know, this is a sensitive question. Is U.S. Space Force on alert about Russia sending nukes into space? That is spicy.
Yeah. That's a spicy question, too. I think all of DoD is on alert about that. Not just the Space Force, but certainly something we would keep a close eye on for sure.
Oh, you mean this isn't news to you? You're not just hearing about this? You guys are actually doing your jobs. That's good. Wesley wants to know, does Space Force see space debris as a threat? And if so, are they working to find ways to address it?
I think that goes back to that, space junk removal question from earlier. We see it as a threat. Absolutely. I think anything on orbit that is moving at 17,000 plus miles per hour towards objects in space could potentially damage or threaten, capabilities on orbit. Thankfully, our management of space assets is pretty robust. We have a good commercial relationship with, companies that have objects in space on orbit. And if there are any kind of threatening debris or anything, we have reporting mechanisms in place to say, hey, this object that we're tracking may come in close proximity to your asset. We can only make a recommendation based on like timing and where that is going to be at in relative to their location. But it's up to those companies to then make the decision whether or not they move or maneuver away from the potential threat.
Yeah. Mira wants to know, can you speak to some of the things Space Force does for agriculture?
Oh, that's an amazing question. So the most recent news that I've seen, like, so we have a relationship with NOAA, which is kind of like our space weather company that the satellites on orbit does kind of monitor like agriculture changes. We enable that technology to take place. There was a recent release of a NASA video actually that was really, really telling about carbon dioxide footprints across the world too. Not necessarily a Space Force thing, but something that showcases like our relationship with, different companies and technology that's able to monitor Earth and different patterns that we would see. But yeah, agriculture is in that environmental analysis aspect of it. Yeah.
Awesome. We are approaching an hour. So I'm sure you have other things to do. And
yeah, I was gonna say I've got like a few more minutes left. If you have any questions, I'll take them. But
well, first of all, I'll ask: is there anything that I missed or that we missed that you feel compelled to share?
I think we hit a lot of milestones today, and I do want to say like thank you so much for one, responding to my message, and being open to doing this. My whole goal is to like interact with civilian space, people and nerds and people that really enjoy like that environment, because the Space Force, while we are a military branch, we have a lot of exciting things that are happening. And to be able to come on your platform and to share, stories from me and about the Space Force is a huge blessing, and I appreciate it. Thank you. But yeah, overall, like if people are genuinely interested about the Space Force, by all means, reach out. Fellow Guardians are always willing to talk about what we do as a service, and we look forward to the excitement that people have about us as a service.
And here, let me share your page just so people can reach out to you. Space Force Chuck.
Yeah, there I am.
On X. And a lot of people have enjoyed this. This has been a very interesting chat. Thank you both immensely for the interview. I mean, I hope that we can chat again, because I'm sure that there will be more reasons to chat in the future. But I'm trying to learn more about this new branch that, I just didn't know as much about. So this is our after action report, right?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. I'd be willing to have another opportunity. Hopefully, like less, professional looking out of the uniform. I can be a little more comfortable. I was just kind of at the end of my shift today, and wanted to at least get the opportunity because we've bumped this a couple of times, and I was like, I can't miss it. I got to do it. So. I
think people probably really like the uniform. The uniform is very cool. The uniform is very cool. Do you think that has the media ever done like a tour of your like facility, or is that probably a big no-no?
It's not a big no-no. I mean, it depends on what location you're at. Obviously we have secure facilities, so we don't allow access to everyone. But I think public affairs, we have the public affairs office out of the Pentagon, and each of the commands, they have their own public affairs office as well. They normally interact with the media too. Recently, I just had an article shared from our base about something we did from a test and evaluation standpoint between two different deltas. It's actually tagged and pinned at the top of my X Spaces page. It was a huge accomplishment to integrate two different military organizations together in one training environment. And yes, that one right there. And those photos are shared from that experiment itself. That's my Delta commander, and then some of the Guardians that were operating consoles in a training environment. And then, of course, the group photo at the very end is myself with my leadership and all the people that were behind the scenes working to make it happen, executing that operation between the two different deltas, and just showcasing that we're constantly leaning and growing and developing our connectedness across the service. So awesome. Pretty amazing stuff. Yeah.
I'm surprised that the uniforms are like camo. They look pretty similar to like Army, right? Or
Yeah, they're the same OCP as the Army and the Air Force. As Department of the Air Force, budget is always a concern. So when we branched out from the Department of the Air Force, we just adopted the Air Force uniform as our main one. And then all we did was, give us the modifiers of unique patches to recognize who we are and where we're affiliated to. And then, of course, our name tapes are a different color.
Yeah, I have a couple people saying it should be black with white
Yeah.
dots.
Yeah.
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. Yeah. When we get a bigger budget and more people and, the service continues to grow, it's all that generational change, we'll see that change happen in the future.
Well, it's just crazy to think about how new you guys are. I mean,
yeah, we turned 5 in December, so we're still really young.
You're babies.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
But you're doing some serious work. So that's very cool. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know that we've all enjoyed it. So I'm sure we'll find another reason to catch up again and hopefully get some perspective from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to reach out anytime. I'd love to do it again.
Awesome. Great. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy your Friday.